Hello friends. I haven't been outdoors properly for a little while because we had this epic snow melt and everything turned to utter sludge and then froze over again. So it was kind of treacherous ice just to get from the house to the car, let alone go on a big walk. So it's better now. I have picked my way here rather slowly though, because there were some places where you just can't tell the difference between the ground and the ice where it's been muddied. Yeah, I was just feeling into this topic that I think is relatively central to the spiritual journey, and that is befriending ego. And most folks who are watching this video probably already have a clear sense that ego isn't a bad thing, that it's actually a part of being human and it helps to get us through life, really. However, I think there's still ways, even if we've moved beyond that perception of spirituality where we feel like we have to transcend the ego, or we have to kill the ego, or annihilate the ego, there's still subtle ways in which it feels a lot better to kind of be beyond ego. So yeah, I guess I just, I thought I'd talk about that a little bit from my own perspective and the way that things have unfolded in my journey, whether or not it's helpful reflections for you. But yeah, I think it is very natural, particularly if we're just kind of like touching on different spiritual traditions at a surface level, when we first start looking at this sense of awakening, to get the impression that the ego is bad and that we have to do something about it, even if it's not annihilated, then it needs to be controlled or disciplined. And I think the first thing that I would offer is just, how much we can and maybe should honor the ego, to honor that part of us which sustains our individual organism, our unique organism. Although we have this shared beingness, and that collective beingness is more and more apparent the deeper and deeper you move into this journey, that there is a diversity of life and we manifest in these particular forms, and for those forms to contribute in any way, they need to be able to sustain themselves. So at a foundational level, ego is about survival. It's about sustaining the organism that you are with and in throughout this life. So there's an honor in that. There's a beauty to it, and a profound intelligence as well. So that's the first thing. And secondly, as I've kind of undertaken this path for myself, it's like initially when we start to awaken to our true nature, there can be this flood of recognition of the way in which ego has been operating. Like all of this stuff is suddenly seen really clearly, and it can be like a horror show. It's like, oh my God, I've been doing that, or whoa, what a motivation. Just to kind of see the way in which we've been unconsciously driven can be very confronting, and it's quite natural to have a recoil from that because we've been conditioned to divide reality into good and bad, right and wrong. It's really natural to see these parts of ourselves that might fit into our human perception of the wrong category as, just really unpleasant to view. And I think a part of working with the spiritual process is starting to get really comfortable with doing that seeing and not having the reaction to it, because anything that might see and condemn ego is in and of itself ego. You know, if there's anything that contains a judgment in others or in ourselves about being in ego, or you know, having egoic motivation, whatever way we kind of structure that thought, we're essentially we're sitting from the seat of our own ego in order to judge ego in others or in ourselves. So it's very counterintuitive to the spiritual process to have this recall, and it's helpful to start to kind of yield and soften into a way of seeing these truths about ourselves and about others that doesn't regress into a sense of superiority around goodness. And I guess for the sake of this video, you know, we can really define ego as that thing or that movement of energy within us that can get very attached to ideas of superiority, whether that's being superior ourselves or being inferior ourselves. The structure of survival in this material realm is of such nature that, you know, some beings survive at the expense of other beings. And so when we watch those nature documentaries and we see the lion eating the antelope, and, you know, we overlay, the human mind wants to overlay this story upon that of, you know, one requires superiority in order to survive, in order to succeed. And the spiritual process, or at least as I've experienced it, is quite the opposite. It's a deconstruction of all concepts of superiority. And even, you know, not in a masochistic kind of way, but from an individual perspective, a willingness even to be seen as inferior, to allow others to perceive us through their own lens of superiority without needing to defend that. Yeah, so as we go along and we start to see these very, I would say, obvious reflections of ego, we can then begin to fall into this trap of like, oh, I've seen the ego, and what I've seen enables me to stand beyond it. And again, this is like an othering of our own internal being, right? This sort of separation. And it's a very natural part of spiritual process, as far as I'm concerned, that, you know, it was necessary for me to kind of sit back as observer and see this nature of reality unfolding as if it was a separate thing to the observer itself, to conscious awareness itself. And that differentiation, that initial dualism, which ironically is quite often what is being considered as non-dualism in many ways of explaining non-dualism. But yeah, that's another topic entirely. So, you know, to sit back, to enter into this dualistic perspective of like, here I am, and there is material reality unfolding, can give us a sense of security and safety in order to be able to view some of these things. But then it can also, in some ways, conceal some of the more subtler reflections of ego. And I think to access that more subtle realm of ego, it's really helpful to actively befriend ego, to, um, you know, be not so much a neutral observer and to actually step into a space of real active love, acceptance, and affirmation, because that creates a level of safety for the ego to become a bit more honest about its motivations. And this is really complex, because when we're speaking about this active engagement with it, we can kind of move into the realm of parts work. And for those of you that are familiar with parts work, if not, just look up a Wikipedia article. It's pretty widely available now. But with a lot of parts work, it is ego structures working with ego structures, which is not really what I'm talking about here, but I think it begins that way. It begins with kind of the internal good parent ego working with the internal child ego. But that kind of active love, affirmation, and validation, and the sense of safety it creates for our internal motivations to be clear, to be honest, to sort of speak out, prevents them from being more slippery and sly and a bit under the radar. But this under the radar ego is just, it's always there, it's always present. And so it's helpful just to accept that, to kind of allow the fact that no matter what we do, no matter how pure we're trying to be, even the act of trying to come from a place of true purity is in and of itself an expression of this a desire for goodness, this desire to be seen and validated and affirmed. It's like, we have this concept now of, I don't know why I keep forgetting this word when I'm on camera, because it came up in another video and I was just thinking about the term this morning, but it's like gone out of my brain. Give me a moment. No, it's not going to come back, so that's okay. I'm just going to try and explain it. The thing where people are like, they're performatively being really woke in order for other people to kind of like see them as super onto it in terms of social equity and stuff. Oh man, I just really want that word. Oh well, it's cool. So it's like, that virtue signaling. Woo! We got there. Okay. So you've got this social virtue signaling that goes on. And that is, that is it's a similar kind of thing. It's like we are egoically driven to do it the right way, because we want to be perceived like that. And then when we start to actually clock on to our own virtue signaling externally, it's like, and this is the way I've experienced it, I have a sense that this is the case for almost anyone on this path, is that virtue signaling ego goes underground. And it's like we're almost signaling to ourselves, in the lack of an external audience. It's like, ha ha ha, I'm so virtuous that I'm not even virtue signaling externally, and I'm not even criticizing others for virtue signaling, because that's how awake I am. So getting to a point where you can kind of see these really slippery, convoluted, deeply entangled spiritual ego aspects, and just kind of have a laugh at them, not even at them, with them, it's like a game of hide and seek or peekaboo, where this inner child that just wants love and validation and to feel like it's good and it's received, is hiding. And then you find it, and it's a celebration to find it, rather than um, feeling disappointed in yourself or not wanting to look. Because as soon as we step into that space of like, I am beyond ego, I don't have ego, I have no motivations that are driven by ego, uh, and that's a worrying place. It's a really worrying place. So just as much as possible to befriend the ego. Um, and of course, accountability is a part of it. We do need to sort of pull ourselves up and go, hey, okay, this is an interesting game, but we don't need to play it right now. But that can be done with deep love and deep compassion. And as soon as we start to embody that compassionate understanding, that lightness, that lightheartedness around discovering where our own ego is hiding, and the incredibly intelligent ways in which it does that, like sidestep. I mean, you've really got to just appreciate the profound uh, complexity of the human organism and the human mind. We really have taken that issue of survival into realms that are unimaginable when you look at the rest of the beings around us, right? As most of their survival strategies are relatively straightforward. And I think that's really honorable and wonderful. I don't in any way see us as more evolved because of this mechanism, but it's just like it's a unique adaptation, in the same way that a salamander is like uniquely adapted to that particular part of the river system where it climbs up the rocks in like one part of, I think it's South America. Like, all of the beings that have emerged from conscious awareness have such unique ways of expressing that survival strategy. And this is the way that the human mind has adapted. And yeah, it's beautiful. And if we can get to a place where we can see our own ego and go, huh, that's so beautiful, that's where the true dissolution starts to take place, in my experience. That the ego isn't annihilated, it's like dissolved into awareness. And there's so much value in having more kind of solidified ego at the start of a spiritual process anyway, because at every stage of that spiritual process, the ego can be in service to unfolding. Initially, our attachment to doing things right can make us very, very disciplined at meditating or yoga or self-study, whatever it is that and even in that new non-dual practice, I would add too, folks who are very, very dedicated to the idea that I don't need practice, that actually awareness is immediately available. Like, that too is a type of attachment and discipline. So that's in service of an unfolding, a mobilization towards seeing truth more clearly. And then it becomes subtler and subtler and subtler. But as long as we can acknowledge what is there, if we have a willingness to face it, even when it's been in hiding, the moment that we face it, if we face it and turn toward it and kind of open our arms and embrace it, this is going to have a much more positive effect on clarifying and solidifying a stream of awareness, an ongoing consciousness of who we really are, because, you know, we are also ego. We are also that. Not beyond that, not above that, not transcending that. It is also us, because there is nothing in this reality, in this entire manifestation, that does not arise from consciousness, from awareness. And so it's necessary to, even when we're faced by other people in this very strong attachment to their own righteousness, to recognize that as a natural part of the human impulse that's been expressed in a very unique way, and that those people may very well be able to see parts of our own ego that we can't. So when we're, you know, seeing another and sitting in that reflection of like, oh, wow, that's some intense egoic drive there right now, you know, they may actually be able to see our own shadow with some clarity that we can't. So keeping that in mind, and just bringing it all back down onto a level that there isn't any superiority in being awake, that we are all in this together, because we are all this together. And that awakening is an individualized project of attaining my peace or my clarity. It's a co-arising. And every single part of what we might perceive to be right, wrong, somewhere in the gray area, has a role to play in that arising of awareness becoming aware of itself. I'm going to close off there.